Welcome to another in our Builders of Bhutan episodes, where we talk to people who have helped build the Kingdom of Bhutan over the last 4 decades. And I have to say that when I selected the name Builders of Bhutan, I didn't realize that if you search for it on YouTube, you have to go through a whole lot of construction companies first. So let me emphasize, we're doing podcasts, we're not building buildings. But today, I'm delighted to talk to another one of our Builders of Bhutan. And I'd like to point out that building the nation of Bhutan has not just been a job for bureaucrats, for civil servants, for officials. That to build a nation, there are many, many more ingredients that have to go into the dish. For example, art, cultural activities and histories, and in particular, today, the idea of literature and of reading. And so I'm absolutely delighted that today we're going to talk to somebody who was instrumental in bringing in the concept of literature and reading to the people, and especially young people of Bhutan. So I'm delighted to introduce Kunzang Choden.
Hello.
Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too.
And we all know
Welcome.
you through that dear dog, Dawa.
Of course.
Who's still around.
Everywhere.
But not a dog today, Ashi.
Yeah.
We're in your garden, and here's this wonderful figure here.
Yes.
Can you tell us about it?
Okay. So this was made by my son-in-law for last year's Beskup Sechu, which was a film festival.
Right.
And this was the symbol. You know, look, he's a dancer, but he has the camera in his hand.
Right.
Yeah. So this was made, and after the festival, it was such a pity to throw it away.
Indeed.
So we said we'll just bring it here and let him stay on as long as he lasts.
There we are.
And
given the Buddhist concept that nothing is permanent,
yeah,
I think that's a wonderful idea. Well, it's a wonderful place to begin and to meet each other.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk to you a little about your, I think I mentioned 3 little questions.
Sure.
Where did you come from? Where did you get to? And what did you do in the building of our Kingdom of Bhutan?
I think to do that, we should go in. So may I invite you to come in and maybe sit down for a while? What do you think?
I think that would be excellent.
Come.
Let's go in.
Yeah, let's go in. Let's go around like this.
Shall we go down here?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for the cup of coffee. That's really
glad.
welcome.
Yeah.
And so actually, we're delighted you've agreed to talk a little bit about your life and your contribution to our kingdom. And so can I begin by just asking you to talk to us a little bit about your family background, which I know is very distinguished, and your childhood.
All right.
What was it like? Where did you come from?
Well, first of all, before I delve into my life and my childhood and my family, I want to thank you for including me in this program, Builders of Bhutan. And of course, I would have also thought building was infrastructural building, but you explained, so I understand that building Bhutan has a lot of ingredients and people like us are also included. Well, I'm one of the oldies, the retirees now. You know, we have a special group in the whole world, and Bhutan is not spared from the grey population, and I am one of those, and very happily part of that group. But I was born in central Bhutan, Bumthang, in one of the valleys called Tang. And all of us came from agricultural and herding families. So my family, my father's family were also farmers, albeit they were considered themselves farmers, but they had other people doing their work.
Doing the work.
Yes. And that
Yes.
was the kind of system that there was. In the 1960s, when I was born, 50s when I was born, these were big, established, landed families who claimed their ancestry to, long before time can actually be accounted for.
Right.
And they had this special status of being descendants of some special personality. So over the centuries, they accumulated a lot of land and people to come and work for them. So I grew up in a large house that was surrounded by a village, and most of the people from the village worked for this family.
Right.
So
you were very privileged.
Overly privileged, and sometimes I say that all this privilege and taking these privileges for granted is making me think back and saying how much I owe the people who kept us in this privileged, positions, making life easy for us. While they did all the work for us.
So this was in Ogyun Choling.
Yes, in Ogyun Choling. I think we were not the only family that lived within the system. I think there were other families around the country, but we were one of those, and we traced our ancestry to some saints in the 13th century and 1300s, and until the 1950s, until the third king, His Majesty Jigme Dorji Wangchuk, who brought in the programs for modern Bhutan.
That's right, yes.
We lived in this very enchanted kind of life.
Yes.
Big house, people working for us, lot of property. But then I can remember, I think I must have been 9, 10 when I started feeling the changes that His Majesty had implemented, which was abolishment of the serf.
Yes. So this was such a significant action by the third king.
Oh my gosh, it was.
Yes.
And the greatest thing about that is nobody resents that.
Right.
When I talk to foreigners, they say, but how did you take all these changes?
Right.
I said, I was on the losing end in a way, but we have no resentment. It was the best thing that happened to Bhutan to bring us to where we are today. The emancipation of the serfs, the land sealing, I think these were monumental changes that happened and really prepared Bhutan for the 21st century.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that was also bringing into our consciousness what is equality, what is justice. We didn't know it in so many terms, but that's what it prepared us for. And of course, these changes were seeping in over the whole country, but in my own life, being selected to go to study in India, because at that time, I'm sure you've heard this many times, that there were no schools.
That's right.
The
Indeed.
idea of education, a Western, modern, secular education was there, but there was no infrastructure.
Yes.
So I think the government was a very inspirational step that took, while the infrastructure was being built, children were already being sent to school.
And this was thanks to the third king.
Oh yes, and Jigme Dorji, the Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister.
Two of them were
the first Prime Minister.
A great team.
I'm told that when the Prime Minister would go around looking for children to send to school, everybody would hide their children because they didn't want them to go away.
Exactly. And when the Prime Minister informed my father to send 2 of his sons to school, my father took it as a great honor that the Prime Minister should ask him to send his children. But my parents didn't want to send 2 sons, losing 2 sons.
2 sons, yes.
So they said I was dispensable. So they sent me, and I happened to be the girl to be sent instead of my younger brother, who was just a year younger than me.
Right.
And they were quite okay, but what was going on in their mind was, I'm sure it was a tremendous dilemma they were in. Should we or should we not? But when they announced to the village that we were being sent, the villagers reacted in such a strong way that I can never forget it. I knew they were coming, but I didn't know what they were coming. But they had all come. One woman from each household had come to scold my parents.
To scold them?
Yes. To say, are you crazy? Do you want the system to break down? We have been living together. We have been depending on you, and you have depended on us. Now you're cutting the system by sending your children away. Who's going to look after this house? Who's going to continue all the old tradition? Right. You cannot do that. And some of them were crying, saying, you cannot do that. But my parents had made up their minds, and they said, okay, we have agreed, and you will go. Of course, my parents knew Kalimpong, Darjeeling, because they had been privileged to go to these places, and they had actually seen school children, you know,
yes.
Darjeeling, Kalimpong, full of school children. And they thought maybe it cannot be such a bad thing. So they decided to send us. And that was in 1962. I was just becoming 10.
Right.
And now, if the bus is late or if your taxi doesn't come on time, people are getting so...
That's right.
We had to walk to Thimphu from Bumthang. It took us 12 days.
Really?
12 days. There was not a single piece of road.
That's
it was
right.
just footpaths. And then of course there were no guest house and homestays and 5-star hotels and, you know, all sort of kind of there was nothing. We just had to go and sleep in caves, you know, or we had a tent when it was really bad and there was nothing. We put up tents, and when the weather was fine, we just slept under the trees, you know, looking at the stars, and you could hear the horses that were, you know, the caravan. And then we cooked every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The people who accompanied us and were interested.
How many of you were in a group?
It was my brother, my older brother, who has passed on, and about 5 men who were, doing...
Right, to look after the
look
camp
after
and
us.
everything.
And Her Royal Highness Ashichiki appointed, she couldn't trust, these people who had never been beyond Thimphu to take us beyond.
Right.
So she had appointed one of her clerks, Dashu Getson, I don't know if you know him. He spoke English and Hindi, and he had actually studied with His Majesty the Third King. So he spoke these languages, and she had commanded him to take us all the way to school. So he was
Kalimpong.
Yes, and so he was our translator. Then when we reached Thimphu, I mean, you can't imagine what Thimphu was. At that time, it was not even Thimphu. It was still called Hatisar.
Right.
Land of the elephants.
Elephant, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's where we were. There wasn't any kind of settlements. There were just a few huts. That was where the shops were kind of running. And the only permanent building I remember was the IB bungalow, the inspection bungalow. So we were privileged again to stay in the inspection bungalow. But our journey beyond was not guaranteed because there was no cars, there was no way to go, and the horses had to go back from there. So we waited a few days till we found an old truck. And the truck took us to a certain point before the train station. And then he said, I'm not going any further, so you have to find your own. And Dashu Getsenla was very good. He found a bullock cart. So we hopped onto a bullock cart, pulled our luggage in, and then went to the train station. And got the train from Bagegong to Siliguri. Then from Siliguri, again, we had to take a taxi and go to Kalimpong, and that was where the education office was, at the Podang. Rani.
So which school in Kalimpong?
I was sent to St. Joseph's Convent.
St. Joseph's,
which was not my happiest year. I had a very terrible, dear, because I didn't speak any language.
Right.
And I was,
Right.
didn't even know Dzongkha. The only language I knew was Bumthang, and nobody spoke
Right.
Bumthang. So I
Yes.
was in school, and they couldn't place me properly because they expected a 6-year or a 5-year-old girl to come, and here I was, so
It's quite
yeah,
grown up. Yes.
9, almost 10. So they put me in a special class, which was a special class created for children like myself. There were a lot of Tibetan
Right.
refugee children who were not beginning with the normal. There were some Burmese and Thai. So this was really for special.
Right.
But they knew something.
Indeed,
They,
yes,
yeah, they,
yes,
they
yes.
knew the alphabet. They knew, but based on my size and maturity, they put me there. But I didn't
knew
understand nothing. So after a few weeks, the nun and the Mother Superior, and
Were they British then?
no, they were Irish. Yeah.
Irish.
Yeah.
Oh, Irish is
Irish,
almost British.
Yes, almost British. And so they had a big discussion, and I knew they were talking about me. And they said, we'll take you to a very nice class. And you know where they put me? They put me in lower kindergarten with age 5, and here I was like this. And that's really a traumatic thing. I
Yes.
literally shrunk. My body
Yes,
became
yes.
small, and I tried to fit in.
Right.
And it was a terrible, terrible year for me.
Well, now, that must have been a traumatic
Oh, yes.
experience. Today, the fashion is that you must not give young children traumatic experiences. But do you feel, or not, that traumatic beginning to your education was something that taught you things that actually had some benefit, or did it just do harm?
In those days, in fact, the word trauma we use so often now was not there.
That's right.
We thought that's just how life had to be.
Right.
So I just took in everything, and I think what it really speaks is that I was not stunted, or I was not, buried under trauma,
Right.
but it brought out the human resilience
Right.
to live and go forward. So I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was going somewhere.
Right.
So this experience was so bad that I didn't want to go back to school. And I just said, I'm going back to Tang, go 12 days walk back to Tang with my mother. And at that time, we were in Samtsi, because I was with the royal mother, royal grandmother, Her Majesty Kunzang Choden. I was
Right.
there because my mother was with her. And I told them, I'm not going back to school. And I think this word leaked somehow. And you know who convinced me to go back to school? Jigme Palden Doji.
Really?
He said, go back to school.
The Prime Minister?
Yes. He says, education is important. And that has stuck in my mind.
Right.
And after resisting and crying and throwing tantrums with my parents and the education officers, his one sentence, education is good for you,
Right.
stuck with me. And I said, okay, I will go.
Which reminds us all the time, doesn't it, that the word of one person can sometimes change our lives. So whenever we talk to people, we always need to remember that what we're saying can have some very big impacts.
Exactly. And not only his words, but I remember the exact situation. I was playing with the royal children,
Right.
Ashidechan and Ashisonam, because we are about the same age. And we were all on top of a tree, and he came down and stood up, looked up and said, go back to school.
Right.
That scene
Right.
is so lucid and
Yes.
fresh in my mind.
Yes.
And I always say it was he who told me the path to education is there. I'm going to give you the best, and you go back.
Right.
And that was
So
it.
you went
I
back.
went back, but I didn't go back to the school. He promised to send me to another school, so I went to another school in Kurseong.
Right, which was
Between Kalimpong and Darjeeling.
Yes, but
again
which was the
another
school?
Irish,
An Irish nuns school, right?
St. Helens.
Yes.
And I was in St. Helens for I think 3 or 4 years.
Right.
Very happy. There was a big Bhutanese group
Right,
there.
so
I was
that
quite happy.
worked.
But some things happened, and not because of bad behavior or bad academics or anything. I was transferred to Loreto in Darjeeling.
Right.
So I did the whole loop.
The lot, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And I finally
We
finished.
do share that in common, because the very first pre-prep school that I went to was a little boarding school run by nuns, and the headmistress is fixed forever in my mind. Her name was Sister Bernadette.
Okay.
And the mere words were like a magic incantation which struck fear into your heart.
Okay. Yeah. So I was sent, I went to, the last school was Loreto Convent, very
Right.
prestigious.
Yes,
quite,
yes.
lot of important people had studied there. And it was also, again, an Irish nun school,
Right.
run by Irish nuns. And I have, the 6 years I was there, I formed such friendships, great respect for the nuns, who I felt were sacrificing and giving themselves for the sake of education. So it was like, education is important.
Yes.
And here were the important people who were making education important for you. So I had a very good experience. And with the 6 years in the same boarding school, the group of friends that I built up are there with me today. In fact,
yes.
I just visited my school
Wonderful.
friend in Chennai.
Wonderful.
2 weeks ago. And so friendships were formed, our morals and our values were enshrined. Everybody asked me, did they ever try to convert you? I said, maybe subtly, and I didn't understand. Yes. But overtly, nobody said you have to go to church.
That's right.
In fact, we didn't even have to do Catholic studies. We did moral science.
Yes, I think this was one of the great strengths of those schools in Darjeeling and in Kalimpong, and also the great strength of late Father Mackey.
Yes.
If you talk to people who were taught by Father Mackey, they will all say he never tried to convert us. And I think his great statement was, why should I try to convert you? You've got a perfectly good religion of your own.
Exactly.
And I think that was one of the great strengths of those schools in those days.
Yeah, they were very tolerant
Yes.
and progressive. In fact, when the news of His Majesty the Third King's death was heard in the school, they had a school assembly.
Right.
And they invited me, because I was one of the seniors, to come in front of the assembly and say a few Buddhist prayers.
Yes.
So that's how they were. They never really tried to convert us.
They were very good influence. But now, so after Loreto, what happened then?
After Loreto, there wasn't in those days kind of counseling and further education and things like this. So we just finished our school. At the time I did my school, we were still doing SC, Senior Cambridge.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So it was only the year after that it changed to Indian School Certificate.
Right.
Yeah. So finished, big achievement. Where to go from there? Nobody told us what to do, where to do. But I was very much influenced by the books that I had read.
Which were your favorite books?
Like Jane Eyre and those English.
Yes,
so of course I said, after school I'm going to do social service.
Right.
But you just cannot do social service. You have to have a job, you have to have the education and things like this. But I was always interested in social sciences as such. So after school, I didn't know what was going to happen. I was just going to go flow with the crowd, because I had my own group of age group of people, and I was just following them, not knowing really what I wanted to do and things like this. So those days, we were so lucky, so privileged, that schools were there, colleges were there, waiting for us, and our education office in Delhi, in India, in Kalimpong, everybody was waiting for us to go to them and just say, I want to go here, I want to go there, and they would send us. So I was very, very fortunate that I happened to be in Delhi. And you know who was at the Education Council in Delhi? Dashu Topke.
Oh, right.
Topke Dorji was there.
Yes.
And he said, "You're very late, you've come very late." I was quite late. He said, "Admissions are all over, but let me try to get you to a college." He said, "I know a college where I might know somebody."
Yeah, right.
So we went to college, Delhi University, and the principal of that college, you know how Dasha has this flat,
Yes,
just
yes,
walk
yes.
in,
Yeah,
everybody
that's
was
right.
begging for admissions and
Yeah.
signs and papers and things like that. He said, "Where's the principal's office?" And he just walked into the principal's office and he introduced himself. And the principal happened to be a schoolmate or a college mate of Ashtashi.
Oh, right.
So they just made the link, and while they talked and talked, my admission was done.
All done. Right.
So I got into college in Delhi University. It was Indraprasth, and of course.
So what sort of year was this? This would be
that
the
was
mid-60s?
no, that was in 70s. I finished in 73, 1973. So I have to be grateful for so many people who let my life happen. So I didn't know what subjects there was. I wanted to do education and psychology, but they said psychology, you do psychology and do one subject, don't do two honors, it's too complicated. So I did psychology. And for me it was really an opening, because so far I was just studying books and reading and things like this, but you know, when you begin to study about the mind,
about people
and understanding, and I did 3 years of psychology, but that also involved math, statistics, and things like this, which was nice. It was not stressful, but I enjoyed college very much. It was a very strict college. It was more strict than the nuns.
Really?
Yes. I was in the hostel, and then I think 2 times a year there was a function where you could invite friends and parents to visit you, and they had to leave at a certain time in the evening. And the wardens, what a horrible name, no? Wardens
sounds like a prison.
Yeah. The wardens came and checked behind doors, under the beds and everything. They even looked in the cupboard that we were not hiding
anybody.
So that's how strict they were. And of course it was a good laugh, because everybody thinks that the convent nuns were stricter, but they were much more strict. But I had a good time. And
so that was 3 years
in Delhi.
And then what happened?
And then another thing which has not continued was again a brilliant idea that people like us had been out of the country for so long. I was out of the country for 14 years.
Right.
We came back and forth for holidays, but altogether from kindergarten up to college, it was 14 years. So there was a program called National Service.
That's right, I remember that very well, yes.
Which was brilliant, because I think somebody realized that we would be completely alienated from our system and our development and our place and our groundedness. We were completely alienated from our... So this education, after your education, we were not directly brought into the bureaucratic system,
that's right.
but we were told to go for national service.
It was a 6-month
It was a 6-month,
program.
and I think at that time, Her Royal Highness Ashidichan Wangmo Wangchuk was the head of the development department, and she was personally assigning people to go to places, and they said preferably you go to a place where you're not from. So if I was from Bumthang, go somewhere else. So you learn about that.
A different area, yes.
And you learn to know that region and appreciate your culture and your country. And in my case, she asked me what I want to do. I said I'd like to go to Tang and teach in the school, because at the same time the school was growing. She said that would be too close to home.
Too close to home, yes.
So you go in the next valley. And she sent me there, and she said there is a Swiss project, the Rural Development Project. and they need a teacher for the adult education because there are a lot of trainees that the Swiss were training, especially in agriculture and forestry. And these trainees were all in their 20s and 25, 20s, yeah, about 25, between 20 and 25. And they don't have any literacy.
Right.
So she said, she didn't tell me, but that was the idea, that I had to teach literacy and numeracy to these kids, and at the same time acts as an interpreter between the Swiss and the people, yes. So that was a good learning experience. I had no training in there, but I just did it instinctively, spontaneously, just by the situation.
Which actually is often the best way of doing something.
Yeah.
Sometimes training can train out originality, spontaneity and imagination. And we go by what we were trained to do. So we were benefited from no training.
It was a learning experience every day, a new situation, a new development. Of course, we had to teach these 20-year-old boys how to hold a pencil and write their names and the numbers. Yes. So during the day where I worked with these, I had there was.
We have to remember that this is not very long ago.
No, 70s.
That's right. So then, what happened after that?
Then what happened was, this is what I was doing, and on my own initiative, the staff children were there, the people who worked on the project. So I also ran a little kindergarten for the staff children. So the trainees, the staff children, and in the evenings, which was very interesting, is the Swiss who were there. That time there were quite a few Swiss.
So Fritz Maurer would have been there.
Fritz Maurer was there, but there were a lot of foresters, there was doctors, there was agriculturists. So what they said is, if you could teach us some culture and teach us some Dzongkha or Bumthang. So I had this very busy day during the day, and in the evenings they invited us to come to their houses. I had another colleague, and to teach them Dzongkha and have dinner with them, which was so nice, and I didn't have to cook.
Yes.
So this went on for a whole 6 months, and I think it was Lempo Jimmy Tinle and late Lempo Yishi Jimpa, they were sent to wherever there were national service centers going on, wherever there were students doing their national service, to make an assessment of how we were doing. So they came, I think they must have been sent by His Majesty the Fourth, and they came and looked at everybody and made an assessment, and lo and behold, I was nominated for the award.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, I'm a gold medalist actually.
Oh, well done.
Nobody knows about it. So after the 6 months, we were all invited and given an audience by His Majesty. And there were quite a few of us.
And this is now the fourth king.
Fourth king, yes. And then all of us were invited for a lunch in the palace. And then we had to give our experiences of our national service. And everybody said it was a good thing. They got rooted. They got to know. They got to know what real Bhutan is, and it's just not what we learned in the schools and things like this. Very, very nice things. And then I was the only girl there. So then he said, "What do you think?" I said, by that time I already had met my husband.
Oh, right.
We weren't married, but no, I think we were married already.
So you met in Bumthang?
Yes, yes. Then I was saying, it should be a little longer, Your Majesty. 6 months is too short.
Too short.
He said, I didn't send you to get married. I asked you to go and do some national work. But that was funny. And the medals, he gave it to us personally. There's, I think, 3 or 4 of us who got gold medals.
So you met your husband then?
While I was doing that.
So now it's been a long marriage, isn't it?
It has been a long marriage. We're soon going to be 50 years.
50 years, wonderful.
So after that, after working in Bumthang and with the Swiss for 1.5 years, then I finally went and taught school in Jakar. That time it was Jakar Junior High School. And for the last 2 years of my term there, I was also the headmistress of the
Right.
school. But in the 1980s also we felt Bumthang was quite isolated.
It was.
It was
yes,
isolated.
yes.
I mean, you could listen to the radio, but there was no newspapers, there were no
No
libraries, no
yes.
access to books or anything like this.
Right.
So we decided that we are still young, we should go back to study.
Right.
So those days, no way of applying online or anything. Everything
Yes.
had to be in the written. So Walter applied to go to agriculture, masters in agriculture to various colleges in the US. He said he felt that he had enough European experience. He wanted the US
Good summer,
experience.
yes.
So we applied to a lot of colleges in the US, and we got, accepted. Walter got accepted in the college in Nebraska.
Right.
We had never heard of Nebraska. We just applied, and then.
But even today, a lot of people have never
don't
heard
know,
of
not
Nebraska.
even
Yes.
not even Americans know.
That's
Where's
right.
that?
Where's that? Yes.
Anyhow, so we went there, and we were there for 4 years. And in the
Right.
4 years, I decided to go back and get a second degree.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the university also, and the best continuation of psychology I thought is sociology.
Right.
Psychology is the mind, and sociology,
Sociology
is the society.
the community.
So that was a really good decision, and I really enjoyed studying. And what is really important for us, and something to realize, is that when you're going to school and college, you just go because that's what you're supposed
Yes.
to do. But when you decide as an adult to go back and study, education is so much more interesting.
That's right.
You learn everything, and you say, how did I miss out that? So I got a second degree in sociology.
Right.
And I was also very involved with the International Women's Group in Nebraska. So we got a lot of opportunities to meet women, to talk about women from, we called it Nebraska in the world, which is actually putting Nebraska in the world, because they also felt the isolation.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So there was a similarity with the Bhutan challenges from that point of view. Yes.
So
After America, you in the
Came
second
back.
degree, you came back here.
we came back here. In fact, we lived in Thimphu because Walter's work, he worked then for the potato project.
Right.
So we were
yes.
based here. And after that, he got an opportunity to work for the International Rice Research Institute, which is based in the Philippines. He got admission there, and he got a job assignment in Laos. So we were in Laos for
Right.
4 years.
Right.
Yeah. And after Laos, the headquarters of his Rice Research Institute was in the Philippines. So they asked him to come back to the headquarters and go to the Philippines. And I was in the Philippines for 1 year, and it was a terrible experience.
Why?
Because this IRI, International Institute of Rice Research, was a ghetto kind of enclosed, enclave, not mixing.
That's
not,
right.
Everything was there, I think made by the Ford Foundation days or some Americans. So it was a campus with everything provided for, exclusive. The moment you left the gate was poverty.
That's right. Yes.
And the lives were so stark. And I couldn't live there.
Right.
I just said, I cannot live there. It's not his contract for 5 years. I said, Walter, you divorce me or you come back to Bhutan. So we would never be called back to IRI because we broke our
Which is
contract.
very
I
interesting.
couldn't tolerate it.
This is an experience actually that the two of us also share, because my late uncle was one of the 4 founders of the Asian Development Bank.
Oh, okay.
And I used to visit him. He lived in a millionaire's enclosure called Rizal Park, Forbes Park, with gated and
Yeah, because a gated
security and
community,
everything.
exactly.
And you are absolutely right. I would go and stay, and I wander down into Melina in the Tondo and see unbelievable poverty.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it was significant.
It was really, for me, I never felt such pain
Yes.
and
Because
displacement.
of course, even though in Bhutan people were not rich and there were, and even today there
We
are
had
poor
dignity,
people,
yeah.
it's not the same as the sort of poverty you see in
no,
these countries.
One of the things that really shocked me was there was these big shopping malls in the Philippines, Makati. So all the people going there dressed up in their fancy cars, they
Yes,
would
that's
go
right.
to these shops. And the poor people who were living under the bridges and in some kind of shelters, and they dressed in their best, they went to church and came to watch the rich people.
Yes.
And that was really a thing, and I said, I cannot take it anymore.
Right.
I said, you can stay here, I'm going back to Bhutan. So he broke
So what
his
happened
contract.
then?
Then we came back to Bhutan, and Walter got again employed by Helvetas.
Right,
He
that's
built
right.
up the RNRC, Jakarta, the
Right.
research station in Bumthang, just above
Right.
the airport.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, in
Yes,
fact,
that's right.
all the land where now is the airport was grazing fields that they developed as for cattle. Now it's for planes.
Right.
See how change happened.
So your husband has contributed to the building of Bhutan as well.
He would never claim that.
Yes.
He
Well,
said,
whether claimed or not, factually, yes.
he says that he really enjoyed working with the people.
Right.
And he regrets that because he was so intent on teaching the youngsters how to
Yes.
speak English, he missed out on learning Dzongkha properly. He speaks,
Well,
but he's too shy. And
right.
he thought he was doing them a service by teaching them to speak English.
Yes.
And one of the things that, this is not about him, but it's for us. He said, I know how comfortably you wear the go. He said he could never wear the go because he couldn't work,
That's
run
right.
around. And
Yes.
he said, I can never have white sleeves. So he wears the go on important occasions when he meets VIPs and once a year on Losar.
Oh, right.
Till all the ceremonies.
So that's
are
coming
done.
up soon.
Yes,
Yes,
so we have
right.
to dust his go and get
Yes,
him ready.
yes.
So after that we've been in Bhutan, and of course we were here again with Helvetas at the headquarters.
We did
here.
such a lot for Bhutan, Helvetas.
Yeah,
Yes.
Helvetas has done a lot, but he, knowing that one of my conditions when we married was that I would go back to my home, to my ancestral home, he took early retirement, and since then
helped
we've
you
been-
build.
Yes,
Let's now
rebuilt.
So if we may we now move on and say a few words about your wonderful ancestral home at Ogin Choling, and what was it like as you grew up and times changed, and you mentioned the Third King's initiatives in abolishing serfdom and all this sort of thing, which must have altered the dynamics of the village and your home, and building it up into what it is now, a lovely museum.
Yeah, it's quite ironic that I didn't live many years at a time in Ogin Choling. I was there until I went to school, which was already by about 9 years old.
Right.
But it must have been very intensive. And sort of it grew on me, and I grew into Ogin Choling, because after all these years being out, getting all sorts of opportunities, he had the opportunity to continue in US. I said, no way. Then of course he had the chance to go back to Switzerland. I said, no way, you've married me.
Right.
You have to live there. And the history of Ogin Choling is such that it was always a patriarch. It was always the son who inherited. And it was taken for granted that my older brother would take it.
Right.
That he would look after it. And but my parents died very young. My father was 37 when he died. In 62, my mother died 2 years later at the age of 32.
Lord, that is very young.
Very young, and we were in school, so we were completely detached physically, but emotionally,
You were there.
I was there all the time. I didn't see their deaths, I didn't hear of their deaths, but all this was pulling me back. And my uncles were there. One was a monk, so he really didn't know what was happening. And my other uncle, who was there for a while, also he didn't do too much. He just couldn't take the changes.
Right.
You know.
Right.
He was so used to being the dasho,
The dasho,
the Lord,
that's right,
and
yes.
he thought things would just roll on their own. It didn't happen. So he was, in his lifetime, Ugun Chilling was really going down. And things were changing.
Yes.
People were changing, things were changing, but nobody actually resented openly, saying that you are, you know.
Right.
Of course, some people made jokes and things like this, that people living on hills usually roll down. You know, they were saying things, clever things like this.
Yes.
But he didn't manage, and he was falling into debt. He wasn't generating anything, and we could see it falling.
Right.
Physically falling down, and the history and everything would just end there. And over the years, I got more and more committed to an idea that I want to revive it. And everybody was, you're crazy in this time and age. I said, it's not going to be revived to make it how it was in the 1500s. Right. I said, I'm going to make it, I'm going to breathe some life into it.
Yes.
And do what we can. We don't have a budget. We don't have a time frame. It's going to be a lifelong project. So we started. First thing was the roofing. The roof.
Roofs are always the first problem,
because
aren't
it was all shingles.
Yes.
And as long as we were the privileged people, we had all these people coming and changing the shingles, repairing. We couldn't do that anymore. So the first big thing we did said, at least have it protected by the rain. So shingles. At that time, the road was only up to the bridge.
I remember it very well, yes.
So we had to carry up everything, you know, across the river, we had to carry it up. So slowly, we didn't say the project ends here.
Right.
We said we'll continue as long as we can, as long as we have the resources, we'll continue. So it was a bit of a patchwork, but we were fortunate that we recognized what were the urgent things to do. The roof, to getting back some of the traditions of the prayers being done, you know, seeing that the temples, we have 5 altars, all that had to be revived, and sort of just really physically open the doors and let the people come in and say, this is yours.
The very interesting challenge of rebuilding the community after all these big changes, which could have destroyed the community.
Exactly. And what I have been trying to tell the villagers is, my ancestors, this is their home, but your ancestors built it.
Yes, indeed.
I said, we couldn't do, our family couldn't do anything.
So actually, this is so interesting. We talk about builders of Bhutan, and we've talked about Limpos who made laws and all this sort of thing. But the building, the rebuilding, the reinforcing of a community is a very difficult building project.
Yes, it is.
And you've had very first-hand experience of building, rebuilding a community.
And it's really, I think the most important link was when people from the village would come and say, my grandfather brought these stones from here.
Yes.
Or my, somebody wove your mother's kira.
Yes.
You know, so we sort of gelled together, brought our histories together. So Ugun Choden is just not my family story, it's the family of it's the story of the community.
The whole community. Yes. And I think I've said to you before, it really, physically looking at it, looks just like a community with the big house on the top there to lead it. And leadership of the community is a very different challenge today than it would have been when you were a child.
Exactly. When I was a child, my father was the Lord. He could do
Yes,
things.
yes.
We're just looking at all the documents that we have in our archives, and it's amazing how I think that time the judiciary and the legal system and everything was just coming together. So we have all these documents of divorces, land settlements, territorial settlements, and my father was doing it.
Right.
So
Yes.
he was the Lord and people looked up to him. Now all that has changed, everything has become centralized. So we don't have that legal position of being in the power to say, you do this, you go do
right.
that. You don't have that. But we still have to have the, how do you say, the inner connection.
That's right.
And people people still say that your grandfather and our grandfather worked together, and I think that is so important.
Yes.
To say that we work together to make things together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that
I'm
is,
not going to ask you the question, which do you think was better, the old system or the new system, because that would be a contentious question to ask. But I do think it is worth asking. The system you describe in the past had many benefits, many advantages. You could say it was more human than the dehumanized bureaucracy of institutionalizing all these things.
Exactly.
But as I say, I'm not going to ask you that question.
No, you can ask me, and I think
But
it's quite
now
good.
Riyang Choden is a wonderful place, and I've been
it's a
privileged
home.
to
Yeah,
stay
it's a
often.
community place.
And for visitors, and I know tourists who've stayed there who've been absolutely, Walter will know the word, begeistert, overwhelmed by the atmosphere of the whole place. And so it is being successful as a tourist.
We try to make it that. It's, you know, in the old days, one of the old things was that this house was for the family. The house, the manor, it belonged to the manor. And people who came into the compound were just because they had something to do there. Now what we have said, we've opened. This is your temple, this is our temple, this is
So
our,
anybody
we
can,
can
yes.
come in. So there's always life around. You must have noticed. We had
That's
we had the early learning centers who had the young children screaming around and shouting, which really brings young, fresh life.
Yes.
And every day around the Lagang, we have the old age people.
Right.
The elders
Well, of
coming.
course, yes, which I've seen. Yes.
So it's become a living
That's right.
center, and it's not coerced, it's not planned, it just happens. Yeah, and that is
All
so,
the best things just
and
happen.
just like you're asking me now, I am now asking the old people what their role was in building the community.
Right.
And I have people, men and women in their 80s, who are telling me about their lives, which is so amazing, of actually building the roads. People from Uginchling went as far as Prinsoling to build the road.
That's absolutely right.
They had never seen a car.
But
They
you're
didn't know
making
what
a
to-
record of this, I hope.
I'm a storyteller, so I make
you're
a story.
very good.
It's
yes.
not records.
Which now
quantitative.
brilliantly takes me to the other way in which you have made such significant contributions to the building of our kingdom today. In the old days, not many people read. Not many people learned to read. And it would be fair to say, I think, you were probably the first recognized Bhutanese author. And I know every school child and many, many tourists, I might add, have read your lovely little book about Dawa the dog. And I know that many tourists have been reconciled to the noise of barking dogs at night through having read your book. Can you tell us how you came into the literary field?
Actually, I think there were many factors. One of the things was because I was latecomer to the reading scene. You know, my age group people are reading, you know, levels above me, and here I was trying to spell out the words. Reading was hard work to catch up 3 years, 4 years. I came from a home, I came from a privileged home where we had texts and texts and texts
Right.
of,
Yes.
the tradition.
Yes.
But they were not accessible to us. The monks read them for us.
Yes.
There were no books for pleasure. There was only books for salvation and penance and
That's right.
philosophy.
Absolutely. Yes.
So we had no children's books or anything like this. So books was something new for us. You either hated it and pushed it away, or you loved it and you embraced it and made it part of your life. And I was one of those, fortunately, who loved books.
Did this arise through your going to school in Kalimpong, for example?
Definitely,
Right.
definitely. In fact, reading was such a strong culture. I think all the women of my age group who went to these schools will see how important reading
Right.
was. We were always, waiting in lines to go into the dining room, waiting for our guests, waiting for something. We all had books. And we were reading, and we had library. We had to go every day, and we had fantastic libraries. And I didn't get enough of it that I would take a book into bed and read with the torch.
With the torch,
Yeah.
illegally.
Illegally, and the nuns would come and
Yes, that's right.
confiscate your
Yes.
book and things like that. So I was really fortunate in that I loved reading books. I read books I didn't understand. I read because there were words, and words
Right.
sort of spoke to me in many ways. Maybe I didn't understand the
Yes.
words, but it was
Words are so important, aren't they?
exactly. And one of the subjects I really enjoyed was always essays, English literature. So I read, I reread, I copied, because
Right.
so it was a long affair that I had with reading, and it continues today.
Yes.
If I don't read for a few days, I feel I'm missing something.
Something, right,
Yes.
right. And I don't know whether you've read the recent book by Shashi Kapoor.
Shashi Tharoor.
Tarua,
Yeah,
Shashi Tarua, on the English language.
Oh yes, yes.
Have
he's
you
written-
read that?
No, I haven't read that.
Oh, I
but
do
I'll watch
recommend it.
Yeah.
It is very
In
worth
fact,
reading.
he was just finishing his master's at the time when I went to college in Delhi University. He
Really?
was also in Delhi University.
Right.
So I had a small contact with him in that when I was doing some modeling and things like, he was the compare.
Really?
So he,
Yes.
so I have this special link with him and I listen. He is fantastic.
Absolutely. It is so ironic. I don't know what Winston Churchill would say to find an Indian who is so brilliant at writing
Exactly,
about English.
Exactly.
I think
And
Churchill
the
would be.
words and the
That's
kind
right,
of connections he makes, the
That's
historical
right.
origins.
So I do
He's
recommend his book.
fantastic.
But, so interested in reading, yes, but you then became a writer. And not all people who read become writers.
Exactly.
How is it you became a writer?
Actually, I first wrote the folk stories that I heard in my childhood, and I
Right.
wrote it for my children when they were growing up because at the time we were living in the US and they often asked, what are we? We are not Americans. And they had lived in Switzerland for a while and we are not Swiss, what are we? I was quite shocked by that. I shuddered and I said, I have not been able to give them anything of my culture or my history, my background. So what I did was I started to write down the stories I had heard in my childhood and which was really important for me to have these stories in my mind throughout my school days. I wrote it for them.
So you started by writing for your children.
The stories I heard in my childhood, yeah.
Right. And then how did that develop on?
And that developed on because I worked hard on
Right.
the book. And I really wanted to get it the best way that I could. And then because I had worked on it and I felt maybe there are other children in
Right.
their
Yes,
position.
yes.
And I would like to share it with them. So it's for my children, but children of their age who are losing ground,
That's right.
who are getting alienated from their own culture and their own stories. Because there's not enough books. There are books from all over the
That's right.
world.
Yes.
But the Bhutanese at that time, there were no compilations of Bhutanese stories. So I wrote it for them. And then once I wrote it and felt it was ready for other readership, I approached the publisher.
Right.
And that's it, just one thing led to the other.
Yes.
And because I had a good positive feedback, then I got encouraged to read and write and write.
Well, as I say, so many tourists who complain about the barking dogs read your book about Dawa, the
stray dog.
The stray dog in Thimphu, and are sort of reconciled to the barking is very interesting. But you started by writing down the stories for your children,
exactly.
because they had become culturally divorced from their background.
Exactly.
Now we have a lot of young Bhutanese who are culturally divorced from their background, living in Australia.
Sad.
Are your books on sale and read in Australia by parents to their young children?
Never thought about it. Maybe I should find an agent among the Bhutanese there to sell my books there.
Would it not be very good to see a situation where parents are reading these Bhutanese stories to their children in order to preserve in the expatriate community?
I think that's something I have not thought of. But I think many of the young parents who have gone to Australia, some of them would have read some.
They will all have read your books.
But I've not tried to, I don't want to be the crusader to get my works done. I'm also thinking from the point of, as book sales, because my distribution is very poor. But you've given me an idea. Maybe I'll look for an agent.
I do. I seriously believe that if we talk about building Bhutan, I'm talking to people like yourself and older who helped build in the past. The task of continuing to build Bhutan is a much more difficult and a much more diversified task than it was. And it, to me, includes building Bhutan in Australia or in America or wherever. And a very important way of spreading cultural history through children's stories, as you have exemplified. So I think that would be
I think
brilliant.
that's really a good idea, and I think it was for me rewriting the stories I heard in my childhood. It's just passed on to my children. Now, when you are physically distanced, the connectivity, re-establishing the connectivity is very important.
Yes.
I know that there's a big demand for Bhutanese films.
Indeed.
Yeah, so maybe folk stories and stories from Bhutan would be interesting, or how would they accept? Because I just only have a vague idea of how the Bhutanese live. They live in big communities, it looks like. So maybe if they could have some kind of I must reach out.
Reading clubs.
Yeah. I must
for
reach
children.
Out. Exactly.
Again, I mustn't tell you, but I mean, I'd suggest the age to inculcate all of this sort of tradition is not when you're 40, but when you're 4. Young children are, and the imagination that reading about some of these stories can engender in the mind. That's when you have young children who develop. And it'll give them a feel for Bhutan. Just as, if I think, having been brought up in England on English fairy stories, the wolf in sheep's clothing and all this sort of thing, they stay with you forever.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this is a very good way of making sure Bhutan does not disappear from these young people's minds. So please do. I think
that's a really good idea. I think even if I can not turn their minds and that they feel that this is the only source of stories and things like this, that they at least know where they've come from.
That's right.
And maybe one day they will all come back.
But also, it's fun. I mean, I enjoyed reading fairy stories and tales of this, that, and the other when I was little. I didn't see it as cultural inculcation or a government effort to do this, that, or the other. They were fun, and your stories are fun.
Yeah. This is really an idea that I never thought about.
But
yeah, this is something that I will take up seriously.
Yes. So, actually, your background and history, walking from Ogyun Choling to Kalimpong, it's so interesting. And I repeat what I said when we first met. It's so important to realize that building a nation is not just about bricks and mortar or rules or laws or institutions. It's also about culture. And you know, was it Henry Ford who said, when I hear the word culture, I reach for my gun? I think it was a famous American millionaire who said that. Because he had a very narrow idea of what culture meant. And culture is all about traditions, stories, the past, understanding, a way of thinking and this sort of thing. And so, in doing that, what you have done through your literary achievements has really done an enormous amount to build Bhutan and to make us all remember the past. So, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Michael.
And we must remember, when we search for this podcast, ignore all the advertisements for construction companies and go straight to Builders of Bhutan podcast. Actually, thank you.
Thank you very
much indeed. It's wonderful to talk to you.
Wonderful to talk to you too. Thank you.
So please do watch our Builders of Bhutan and remember the debt that we all owe to our predecessors, ranging from kings to commoners, who have helped preserve the kingdom of Bhutan.